When Jimin whispered, "Do you still need me?" Jungkook forgot how to breathe loudly, crying face multiple musical notes. The music cut out mid-beat, lights flaring white like an exposed nerve, and in the sudden hush Jimin leaned close enough that his breath brushed Jungkook's ear and whispered, "Do you still need me?" Jungkook forgot how to breathe. The roar of the stadium collapsed into a distant ocean, replaced by the sound of his own pulse hammering against his ribs, each thud too loud, too intimate. Sweat slid down his spine beneath the stage jacket, cold despite the heat. He kept his mic raised because dropping it would mean admitting the moment had knocked him off balance, and Jungkook had spent years training himself never to fall in public. Yet his fingers trembled, the metal slick in his grip, and for half a second his vision tunneled until all he could see was Jimin's profile, sharp jaw, lips parted from the whisper, eyes searching with a nakedness that felt almost dangerous. The crowd thought it was choreography. They screamed louder, sensing drama without understanding its shape. Cameras zoomed in, red tally lights blinking like quiet warnings. Jungkook forced a smile, the kind he'd perfected since he was 15, the kind that lived in his cheeks without touching his eyes. He nodded once, a movement so small it could be mistaken for rhythm. The band picked the song back up, percussion crashing in like a rescue rope, and Jungkook sang his line on instinct, muscle memory carrying him through notes his heart no longer felt capable of holding. Jimin stepped back into formation, but the space between them crackled. Jungkook could still smell him, soap and something citrusy, a familiar comfort that now pressed against old scars. He sang while watching the floor marks blur, thoughts spiraling to places he kept locked for survival. The question echoed again, softer but heavier with each repetition. "Do you still need me?" He remembered the first time he'd needed Jimin and hadn't known how to say it. Back then, need felt like weakness, like something that could be taken away. He'd learned early that love was safest when it stayed unnamed. The song ended to thunderous applause. Confetti cannons erupted, silver flakes raining down like frozen sparks. Jungkook bowed, muscles tight, jaw clenched, and when he straightened Jimin was already looking at him, expression carefully neutral for anyone else but screaming to Jungkook, who had learned to read the smallest shifts. There was fear there. Not the kind that panicked, but the kind that waited, patient and exhausted, for an answer that might never come. Backstage was chaos, staff shouting cues, water bottles shoved into hands, makeup dabbed at sweat. Jungkook moved through it all like a ghost. His chest still felt too tight, as if the whisper had lodged itself beneath his sternum. Jimin brushed past him, fingers grazing his wrist for less than a second. It was accidental enough to be plausible, deliberate enough to mean everything. Jungkook flinched. In the dressing room, the door closed with a soft click that felt louder than the stadium ever had. The silence pressed down. Jungkook set his mic on the table and stared at his reflection, at the man who looked calm and successful and untouchable. He laughed once, a short, humorless sound, and dragged a hand through his hair. "Hyung," he called, voice steadier than he felt. "What was that?" Jimin didn't answer immediately. He sat on the couch, elbows on his knees, hands clasped as if in prayer. The stage lights had left faint glitter on his cheekbones. He looked tired in a way no sleep could fix. "I needed to know," he said finally, "before I lose the courage." Jungkook turned to face him, the room suddenly too small. "You couldn't wait until after the show?" "If I waited," Jimin said softly, "I wouldn't ask at all." That honesty cut deeper than accusation ever could. Jungkook swallowed, memories surfacing uninvited, the nights they'd stayed up talking about everything except the thing that mattered, the way Jimin always noticed when Jungkook's hands shook before big performances, the silent agreement to protect the group at the cost of themselves. He had built his life on control, on discipline, on not wanting things that could complicate the machine they were part of. Needing Jimin had been the one variable he'd never managed to eliminate. "I don't know how to answer," Jungkook admitted, the words tasting like rust. "Because if I say yes, it changes things." Jimin looked up, eyes shining but steady. "And if you say no, it changes things too." The truth of that settled between them. Outside, fans chanted their names, unaware that something fragile was being weighed behind closed doors. Jungkook paced once, then stopped. He noticed details the way he always did when anxious, the hum of the air conditioner, the faint smell of sweat and cologne, the way Jimin's foot bounced when he was nervous, A habit he'd had since trainee days. I've spent my whole life being needed, Jungkook said slowly. By the fans, by the company, by the team. I don't know how to separate that from wanting. Jimin stood, crossing the room until they were an arm's length apart. He didn't touch him. He never pushed. I'm not asking you to choose, he said. I'm asking if there's still a place for me that isn't just the stage. Jungkook closed his eyes. Images flickered, late-night studio sessions where Jimin fell asleep on the couch, his head tipped back, mouth slightly open, the quiet comfort of shared glances when interviews became too much, the way Jimin's laughter always found him, even in crowds. Need wasn't always desperation. Sometimes it was home. He opened his eyes and met Jimin's gaze. The fear there mirrored his own, twin reflections caught in different bodies. Jungkook exhaled, a long, shaky breath he felt all the way to his toes. I still need you, he said, voice low, certain in a way that surprised him. I just didn't know how to admit it. Jimin's shoulders sagged, relief washing over his features so visibly it made Jungkook's chest ache. He smiled, small and real, nothing like the practiced expressions they wore outside. That's enough, Jimin said. For now. They stood there, the world held at bay by four walls and a shared understanding. Jungkook felt something loosen inside him, a knot he'd carried for years beginning to unravel. He knew the path ahead wouldn't be simple. There would be consequences, conversations, choices that demanded courage he was still learning to claim. But for the first time, the fear felt lighter than the silence he'd been living in. A knock sounded at the door, reality intruding. Jungkook glanced toward it, then back at Jimin, committing the moment to memory. When he reached for the handle, his breathing was still uneven, but it was his again. The hallway swallowed them the moment the door opened, sound rushing back in like a wave, staff calling names, footsteps echoing, the distant chant of fans vibrating through concrete. Jungkook stepped out first, shoulders squared, mask already sliding back into place. Jimin followed half a step behind, close enough that Jungkook could feel his warmth, far enough that no one would notice anything unusual. That distance hurt more than he expected. 5 minutes to change, a manager barked, clipboard snapping shut. Jungkook nodded automatically. His heart was still racing, but now it wasn't panic, it was something sharper, more alive. He walked toward the locker area, then stopped when Jimin's fingers caught the sleeve of his jacket, light but insistent. Don't disappear, Jimin murmured without looking at him. The words landed like a challenge. Jungkook leaned closer, voice low. I won't. But you shouldn't say things like that where people can hear. Jimin finally met his eyes, defiance flashing. Maybe I'm tired of hiding. That was new. Dangerous. And it sent a jolt straight through Jungkook's spine. They changed in silence, the room thick with unspoken thoughts. Jungkook's hands moved on autopilot, but his mind replayed Jimin's whisper again and again, reshaping it, testing its weight. He caught Jimin watching him in the mirror, their eyes locking for a second too long before Jimin looked away. The air between them felt charged, as if one wrong move could ignite everything. The next segment of the show passed in a blur. Jungkook performed flawlessly, but every lyric felt altered, every glance loaded. When Jimin brushed his shoulder during choreography, it was sharper than any spark effect, and Jungkook had to bite the inside of his cheek to stay grounded. The crowd screamed, unaware that something volatile was unfolding in plain sight. After the encore, when the stage lights dimmed and the final bows were done, Jungkook barely made it backstage before Jimin grabbed his wrist and pulled him into a storage room, the door slamming shut behind them. The sudden quiet was electric. What are you doing? Jungkook hissed, even as his pulse spiked. Jimin's chest was rising fast, eyes blazing. You said you still need me. I need to know what that means. Right now. Jungkook stared at him, shock giving way to something dangerously close to anger. This isn't the place. Then when? Jimin shot back. When we're older and braver and it's too late. The accusation stung because it was true. Jungkook raked a hand through his hair, frustration cracking his composure. You think this is easy for me? Every move we make is watched. One mistake and what? Jimin interrupted, stepping closer. They'll see we're human. Jungkook laughed bitterly. They'll tear us apart. Silence fell, heavy and suffocating. Jimin's expression softened, the fire dimming into something more painful. I know the risk, he said quietly. I've always known. But I can't keep pretending this doesn't matter. Jungkook's defenses crumbled inch by inch. He reached out before he could stop himself, fingers curling into the fabric of Jimin's sleeve. The contact sent a shock through both of them. Jimin inhaled sharply but didn't pull away. It matters, Jungkook admitted, voice rough. More than I ever let myself believe. Jimin's eyes glistened. Then stop running. The door rattled suddenly, a muffled voice calling Jungkook's name. They froze, bodies inches apart, the reality of their situation crashing back in. Jungkook released Jimin reluctantly, heart pounding. We'll talk, Jungkook said, urgent and sincere. Tonight. Somewhere safe. Jimin nodded, swallowing hard. Don't forget. I won't, Jungkook promised, and this time he meant it with every fractured piece of himself. That night, the city glowed beneath their hotel windows, neon reflections stretching across the glass. Jungkook paced the room, nerves buzzing, replaying every risk and every possibility. A soft knock finally came. When he opened the door, Jimin stood there, hoodie pulled low, eyes searching. They didn't speak at first. The door clicked shut, sealing them into the quiet. Jungkook leaned back against it, suddenly unsure of his footing. Jimin crossed the room slowly, as if giving him time to retreat. He didn't. You look terrified, Jimin said gently. I am, Jungkook replied. But I'm more scared of losing you. The honesty broke something open. Jimin stepped into his space, resting his forehead against Jungkook's. Their breaths mingled, shallow and uneven. Then stay, he whispered. Jungkook's hands trembled as they found Jimin's waist, grounding himself in the reality of him, solid, warm, here. He felt Jimin's fingers curl into his shirt, tentative but desperate. The moment stretched, fragile and explosive. I don't know how this ends, Jungkook murmured. Jimin smiled through unshed tears. Neither do I. But I want to be in it with you. Jungkook closed the distance, not with a kiss yet, but with a promise made in silence, his arms tightening as if to say he was done letting fear decide everything. Outside, the city kept moving, unaware that behind one lit window, two hearts were colliding, rewriting everything they thought they knew about need, love, and courage. The silence between them after Jungkook whispered stay felt like a raw, open wound, tender, dangerous, and too intimate to look at directly. Jimin didn't move. Jungkook didn't pull away. Their foreheads rested together, breaths brushing softly as if they were learning to breathe in the same rhythm, but the moment couldn't hold forever. A sudden vibration from Jungkook's phone shattered their fragile stillness. The screen lit up with a flood of notifications, screenshots from the livestream, trending hashtags, concerned messages from staff. Jimin flinched as the glow illuminated Jungkook's face, revealing how pale he had become. They're already talking about it, Jungkook whispered, pulling back as if waking from a trance. Jimin nodded slowly. Of course they are. Jungkook ran a trembling hand over his face, pacing again with the same restless energy as before. But this time, it wasn't anger or panic, it was fear. Deep, chest-tightening fear. They think, Jungkook stopped. Swallowed. They think we, you know. Jimin's eyes softened, though his heart ached. Let them think whatever they want. We know the truth. That's the point, Jungkook said sharply, turning to face him. I don't even know the truth. The confession tore from him like something ripped loose after years of pressure. Jimin stepped closer, voice gentler. Then we figure it out together. Jungkook shook his head violently, back hitting the wall as he slid down until he sat on the floor. He looked up at Jimin with wide, exhausted eyes. You don't understand what this means for us, he said. For everything we've worked for. The team. The company. Your image. Mine. And what about you? Jimin asked softly. What does it mean for you, Jungkook? Jungkook hesitated. His lips parted, but the words didn't come. Jimin sank to the floor beside him, close but not touching. If you won't tell them the truth, at least tell me. Jungkook's breathing was uneven as he tried to gather thoughts that were slipping through trembling fingers. Shadows flickered across his face, fear, guilt, longing, confusion, colliding too fast to separate. I can't tell you the truth, Jungkook whispered. Why not? Because if I say it, he said, voice cracking, it becomes real. Jimin's chest tightened. What becomes real? You. Jungkook laughed weakly, bitter and defeated. Us. Everything I've tried not to feel. Jimin swallowed, heart pounding. And what exactly have you tried not to feel? Jungkook looked at him, then really looked. The vulnerability in his eyes was devastating. Everything, he whispered. The word trembled between them, fragile and heavy. Jimin's breath caught. For a moment, he couldn't speak, couldn't move. Jungkook leaned forward, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor as if it held every secret he had buried. I kept pushing you away, Jungkook said. Because every time I got close to you, it felt like losing myself. Jimin's voice came out quieter than he intended. Losing yourself to what? Something I'm not supposed to want, Jungkook whispered. And what is that? Jungkook's jaw tightened. His hands shook. Then he whispered the truth like a confession he had never meant to say aloud. You. Jimin exhaled sharply, like the ground had shifted beneath him. He reached out slowly, placing a hand on top of Jungkook's trembling one. Jungkook didn't pull away. You're not supposed to want me, Jimin said softly. Who told you that? No one had to, Jungkook answered. I told myself. I made rules so I wouldn't cross lines. So I wouldn't get hurt. So you wouldn't get hurt. And has any of it worked? Jungkook let out a hollow breath. No. Jimin slid closer, letting their shoulders touch. The warmth of contact seemed to melt something in Jungkook's chest. What did you think would happen? Jimin asked gently. That wanting me would destroy everything? Yes, Jungkook whispered. No. I don't know. But I couldn't risk it. Jimin took Jungkook's chin between his fingers, turning his face toward him. Jungkook's eyes widened at the sudden closeness. You're not protecting me by hiding, Jimin said. You're hurting me. Jungkook flinched. The guilt in his expression was immediate, deep, and unguarded. I know, he whispered. I hurt you because I couldn't deal with what I felt. What do you feel? Jimin pressed. Jungkook closed his eyes, and for once, he didn't run. He let the truth out on a trembling exhale. When I look at you, it feels like everything inside me is pulling in your direction. Jimin felt something bloom painfully in his chest, something dangerous and bright. And when you're close, Jungkook continued, I forget to breathe. I lose control. I get jealous without meaning to. I hate seeing you with anyone else. And I hate myself for hating it. His voice broke. And when you walked away last week, I thought I was going to lose my mind. Jimin's eyes filled with heat and emotion. Then why didn't you tell me? Because I thought it was better if you never knew, Jungkook said. Better for you. Safer for me. I don't want safe, Jimin whispered. I want honest. And I don't know how to be honest without ruining everything. Jimin leaned forward until their foreheads touched again. Jungkook's breath shuddered. You already ruined it, Jimin murmured. The moment you made me fall for you without warning. Jungkook inhaled sharply, fingers instinctively gripping Jimin's sleeve. Hyung, don't say things like that. It's the truth. Jungkook opened his eyes, stunned, terrified, undone. You feel that way? Jimin brushed a thumb over Jungkook's cheek, soft and steady. What do you think? Jungkook's voice was barely audible. I think I'm not dreaming for once. Jimin smiled a soft, heartbroken smile. You're not. Something in Jungkook broke then, not in pain, but in release. Every wall he had built, every fear he had carried, every denial he had forced on himself, all of it came undone in the warmth of Jimin's touch. He leaned into him, resting his head against Jimin's shoulder, breathing him in like he had been holding his breath for months. Jimin wrapped an arm around him, slow and protective, fingers brushing soothing circles against Jungkook's back. For the first time that night, Jungkook's voice was steady. I don't want to run anymore, he whispered. Jimin's hold tightened, gentle and grounding. Then don't. The room felt smaller, quieter, sacred in a way neither of them had words for. Jungkook lifted his head slowly, eyes searching Jimin's face with a rawness so intense it almost hurt to look at. When the world finds out, Jungkook whispered, they'll tear us apart. Jimin rested a hand over Jungkook's heart. Then let them try. Jungkook exhaled a shaking breath, not in panic this time, but in fragile relief. And for that one night, in the warm glow of the quiet room, The world outside didn't exist. Only them. Only truth. Only the beginning of something neither could hide from anymore. The meeting room smelled like coffee that had gone cold and tension that refused to dissipate. Jungkook sat at the long table with his hands clasped tightly in front of him, knuckles pale, while Jimin stood near the window, arms crossed, staring at the city as if it might offer answers it never had before. Management filed in one by one, faces carefully neutral, eyes sharp. A tablet slid across the table toward Jungkook. Clips from last night, the manager said evenly. Slow motion edits. Lip readers. Speculation. Jungkook didn't touch it. Speculation isn't proof. No, another voice replied, colder. But perception becomes truth fast. Jimin turned around then, finally breaking his silence. So what's the plan? Deny we're human? A beat of stunned quiet followed. Jungkook's heart dropped, but a strange pride bloomed too. Watch your tone, the manager warned. Jimin didn't flinch. I'm tired of being careful while rumors decide our lives anyway. Jungkook stood abruptly, chair scraping loudly against the floor. This is my responsibility, he said, placing himself subtly between Jimin and the table. If you want statements, scrutiny, damage control, put it on me. Jimin's eyes widened. Don't do that. I'm doing it, Jungkook replied without turning. I won't let him take the fall for honesty. The room buzzed with murmurs. One executive leaned forward. Are you admitting something happened? Jungkook hesitated, lungs burning. He felt Jimin's gaze like fire on his back. In that moment, fear screamed at him to retreat, to calculate, to protect the image he'd built with blood and discipline. But another voice, quieter, steadier, told him he was exhausted from pretending. I'm admitting, Jungkook said slowly, that we crossed a line we've been dancing around for years. And I won't insult everyone's intelligence by pretending otherwise. Jimin sucked in a sharp breath. Silence fell so heavy it felt physical. You realize what this could cost, the manager said. Jungkook nodded. I do. What about the group? Someone pressed. Jungkook's jaw tightened. Lying costs them too. Jimin stepped forward, voice shaking but strong. If this becomes a scandal, it's on both of us. Don't erase me to save yourself. Jungkook finally turned, eyes fierce. I'm not saving myself. I'm choosing you. That confession hit the room harder than any headline ever could. The meeting ended without a verdict, only warnings and timelines and the promise of more conversations. When the door closed behind them, Jungkook's knees nearly gave out. Jimin caught his arm instinctively. You didn't have to do that, Jimin whispered. I did, Jungkook replied, voice rough. I couldn't breathe pretending anymore. They returned to Jungkook's room in silence. The adrenaline faded, leaving raw nerves in its wake. Jimin sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor. I'm scared, Jimin admitted. Not of losing fame. Of losing us. Jungkook knelt in front of him, hands resting on Jimin's knees. I don't know how to promise safety, he said softly. But I can promise truth. Jimin let out a broken laugh. That's the most terrifying promise of all. Jungkook smiled faintly. I know. They talked until dawn about fear, about resentment they'd never voiced, about moments they'd misread and words they'd swallowed. There were tears, raised voices, apologies long overdue. Jungkook confessed how suffocating leadership felt, how being needed by everyone had made him forget he was allowed to need one person deeply. Jimin admitted how invisibility hurt more than criticism, how waiting had carved doubts into his chest. When the sun finally rose, pale light spilling across the room, they sat side by side, drained but lighter. So, Jimin said quietly, what happens now? Jungkook took his hand, fingers intertwining without hesitation. Now we stop surviving separately. Jimin leaned his head against Jungkook's shoulder, eyes closing. That's enough, he murmured, and for the first time in years, Jungkook believed it was. The quiet didn't last long. Jungkook's phone vibrated again, then again, the screen lighting up with messages he didn't want to read but couldn't ignore. Notifications stacked like falling dominoes, alerts, links, headlines half-written by strangers who thought they knew everything. Jimin noticed immediately. It's spreading, he said, not as a question. Jungkook nodded slowly. Faster than they expected. Jimin exhaled and leaned back against the headboard, staring at the ceiling. So this is what honesty costs. Jungkook sat beside him, shoulders heavy. This is what fear delays. Jimin turned to him sharply. Are you saying this is my fault? No, Jungkook replied instantly, voice firm. I'm saying if I'd been braver earlier, you wouldn't have had to ask me on a stage in front of 50,000 people whether I still needed you. The words landed hard. Jimin's jaw tightened, eyes shining. I didn't want to corner you. But you did, Jungkook admitted. And I deserved it. Jimin laughed once, sharp and humorless. You always take responsibility like it's a shield. Sometimes I just want you to admit you were afraid. Jungkook closed his eyes. I was terrified. That stopped Jimin. Jungkook looked at him fully now, voice stripped of performance, of leadership, of armor. I was terrified that if I chose you openly, the world would take you away from me. So I tried to keep you safe by keeping you hidden. And I didn't realize how cruel that was until last night. Jimin's breath hitched. You don't get to decide my safety without me. I know, Jungkook whispered. I'm learning. A sharp knock echoed through the room, abrupt and unforgiving. Both of them froze. Jungkook, a familiar voice called from the other side of the door. We need to talk. Now. Jimin's fingers curled into the fabric of the sheets. This is it. Jungkook stood, heart pounding, then stopped and turned back. He cupped Jimin's face gently, grounding himself in the reality of him. Whatever happens, he said quietly, don't doubt this. I meant every word. Jimin nodded, eyes wet but steady. Then don't back down. Jungkook opened the door. The manager's expression was tight, controlled. We have a problem, he said, stepping inside without waiting for permission. A big one. He held up his phone, an image frozen on the screen, Jimin and Jungkook on stage, faces close, the whisper captured from a different angle than before. Clearer. Intimate. Impossible to dismiss. This is everywhere, the manager continued. And fans are divided. Some are celebrating. Others are furious. Sponsors are calling. Jimin stood, moving beside Jungkook. So what do you want us to do? The manager hesitated. We want Jungkook to release a statement. Solo. Frame it as misunderstanding. Emotional moment. Brotherhood. Jungkook felt something snap. No, he said. The word echoed. The manager blinked. Think carefully. I am, Jungkook replied, voice shaking but resolute. I won't erase him to make things easier. Jimin stared at Jungkook, stunned. You don't have to. Yes, I do, Jungkook cut in, turning to him. Because every time I stay silent, you disappear. The manager's tone hardened. This could jeopardize everything you've built. Jungkook's eyes burned. I didn't build it alone. Silence stretched. Jimin's hand slipped into Jungkook's, fingers lacing without apology. It was a small gesture, but it felt louder than any press release. The manager exhaled slowly. Then you're choosing chaos. Jungkook squeezed Jimin's hand. I'm choosing truth. After the door closed, the room felt different, lighter and heavier all at once. Jimin let out a shaky breath. You just set fire to your own safety net. Jungkook looked at him, a faint, exhausted smile tugging at his lips. I was tired of standing on it alone. Jimin stepped forward, voice trembling with emotion. I don't need you to be fearless. I need you to be here. Jungkook pulled him into an embrace, tight and grounding. I'm here, he whispered. And I'm not running. Outside, the world argued, speculated, demanded explanations. Inside that room, two hearts beat loudly, finally in sync, knowing the path ahead would be brutal, but no longer lonely. Morning arrived like an interrogation light, harsh and unavoidable. Jungkook woke to the sound of his phone vibrating non-stop on the bedside table, a low relentless hum that made his chest tighten before he even looked. Jimin was already awake, sitting against the headboard, scrolling with a furrowed brow that told Jungkook everything before a word was spoken. It's everywhere, Jimin said quietly. Jungkook rubbed his face, then reached for the phone anyway. Headlines blurred into each other, praise wrapped in poetry, outrage sharpened into knives. Some called it brave. Some called it betrayal. Some demanded clarity, as if love owed the world a press release. They're dissecting every word, Jungkook muttered. Every breath. Jimin locked his phone and turned to him. Let them. Jungkook looked at him sharply. You say that like it doesn't hurt. Jimin's mouth tightened. It does, he admitted. But not as much as lying. There was a knock. Again. Jungkook's shoulders stiffened on instinct. This time it was the manager and a legal advisor, faces grave, movements precise like surgeons preparing for a difficult operation. We need to talk, the manager said. Now. The room filled with voices layered in caution and consequence. Contracts. Morality clauses. Sponsors monitoring the situation. The words stacked higher and higher until Jungkook felt like he couldn't breathe beneath them. You need to distance yourselves publicly, the advisor said. At least for now. Jimin laughed, short and incredulous. You mean pretend last night didn't happen? It's damage control, the advisor replied evenly. Jungkook's hands curled into the sheets. Damage, he echoed. Is that what we are? No one answered him. Jimin stood abruptly. We won't deny it, he said. We didn't even define it. We talked about honesty. And honesty is dangerous right now, the manager snapped, then softened his tone. Please. We're trying to protect you. Jungkook finally spoke, voice low but unwavering. Protection that requires silence isn't protection, he said. It's a cage. The advisor exchanged a look with the manager. Then be prepared for fallout. When they left, the room felt stripped bare. Jungkook sat heavily on the bed, hands shaking now that the adrenaline was gone. I didn't think it would be this fast, he whispered. Jimin sat beside him, close enough that their thighs touched. Neither did I. Jungkook turned to him, eyes glassy. Do you hate me for pushing this? Jimin answered without hesitation. No, he reached out, cupping Jungkook's face with both hands, grounding him. I hate that you think I would. The touch broke something open. Jungkook's breath hitched, and suddenly he was crying, silent, shoulders trembling, years of restraint collapsing all at once. Jimin pulled him in without a word, holding him like it was the most natural thing in the world. I'm so tired, Jungkook said into Jimin's shoulder. I don't want to fight anymore. Jimin pressed his forehead to Jungkook's hair. Then don't, he whispered. Stand. I'll fight with you. That afternoon, they went to rehearsal anyway. Cameras followed. Staff watched too closely. Every step felt heavier, but when Jungkook stumbled during choreography, Jimin didn't hesitate. He reached out in full view of everyone, steadying him openly. A hush rippled through the room. Someone whispered, they're really doing this. Jungkook met Jimin's gaze, heart racing. We are, he murmured back. That night's performance was the most emotionally charged of the tour. Jungkook sang like his voice was carved straight from his ribs, raw and trembling. Jimin harmonized beside him, eyes bright with unshed tears, their voices clashing and blending like confession and defiance intertwined. At the final bow, Jungkook did something he'd never planned. He turned to Jimin and squeezed his hand once, deliberately, visibly. Not dramatic. Not hidden. Just real. The crowd erupted, not unified, but powerful. Love shouted back at them louder than hate. Backstage, Jungkook leaned against the wall, breathless, adrenaline still roaring. I think we crossed a line we can't uncross, he said. Jimin smiled, tired but radiant. Good. Jungkook laughed through lingering tears. You're unbelievable. Jimin stepped closer, lowering his voice. Say you don't want this, and I'll walk away. Jungkook looked at him, heart bare and aching. I want this, he said. I want you. Even if it scares me. Jimin's eyes softened, something tender and fierce colliding inside them. Then whatever comes next, he said, we meet it together. Later, alone again in the quiet after the storm, Jungkook lay awake listening to the steady rhythm of Jimin's breathing beside him. The world outside was loud, demanding, unforgiving, but here, in this fragile pocket of honesty, Jungkook felt something he hadn't felt in years. Peace didn't mean safety. It meant truth, and for the first time, that felt like enough. The storm didn't end all at once. It softened slowly, like rain easing into mist. Days passed, then weeks, and the world adjusted in ways Jungkook hadn't expected. Some doors closed quietly, contracts rewritten, schedules thinned. Other doors opened just as unexpectedly, messages of support from fans who spoke not as an audience but as people, Words filled with gratitude for honesty, for courage, for making them feel less alone. The noise never fully disappeared, but it changed texture, losing some of its sharpest edges. What surprised Jungkook most was the silence inside himself. He no longer woke up gasping, heart racing as if he'd been running from something unnamed. When anxiety crept in, it didn't hollow him out the way it used to. Jimin noticed it first. "You're breathing differently," Jimin said one night as they lay on the couch, legs tangled, the city lights blinking lazily through the window. Jungkook smiled faintly. "I think I finally learned how." Jimin studied him, then rested his head on Jungkook's chest, listening. "You know," he said softly, "I didn't ask that question on stage to trap you." "I know," Jungkook replied, fingers tracing slow patterns along Jimin's arm. "You asked because you were tired of disappearing." Jimin nodded. "And because I needed to know if I was loving someone who could see me clearly." Jungkook tightened his hold just slightly. "I see you. Not as a risk. Not as a responsibility. As the person I choose." That word choose still carried weight, but now it felt grounding instead of terrifying. On their first stage back together after everything, the lights felt different. Softer. The crowd roared as always, but Jungkook didn't scan faces for judgment anymore. When he glanced at Jimin mid-song, it wasn't out of habit or choreography. It was instinct. Jimin met his gaze and smiled, not carefully, not secretly, but freely. They didn't whisper this time. They didn't need to. After the show, alone in the quiet that followed applause, Jungkook stood by the window while Jimin leaned against his back, arms wrapped around his waist. "Do you ever regret it?" Jimin asked quietly. "Telling the truth." Jungkook thought of the fear, the fallout, the nights he'd questioned everything. Then he thought of this moment, steady, warm, real. "No," he said with certainty. "I regret how long I waited." Jimin pressed a kiss between his shoulder blades, gentle and sure. "Then we're okay." Jungkook turned, pulling him close, forehead resting against his. "We're more than okay. We're honest. And I think that's what I needed all along." Jimin smiled, eyes soft. "So," he whispered, echoing the question that had once shattered everything, "do you still need me?" Jungkook didn't hesitate this time. He kissed Jimin's temple, his cheek, his lips slow, unafraid. "I always did," he said. "I just finally learned how to say it out loud." Outside, the world continued with all its uncertainty and noise. Inside, two hearts beat steadily, no longer hiding, no longer holding their breath, choosing each other, again and again, in the quiet aftermath of truth.